I'd like to introduce now for session 5, thanking our session partner KPMG, and invite our first guest speaker, Holly Knight, to the stage. Holly is the Regional Manager of Fortescue Future Industries, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her presentation this morning. Morning, Holly, you look bright and breezy.
Not sure if I've got slides at all. Do I start with that? No? Morning, everyone. Hopefully I've got some slides. No. Doesn't matter, I've got lots to talk about. Anyway, thank you everyone for making it in this morning. I would like to start by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi people whose land on which we meet today, and acknowledge their elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people, where I was born, Walyalup, you might know it as Fremantle. I grew up there. I spent 10 years overseas in the UK, but I returned back to live and work on Whadjuk Noongar land. I now also work in the Kimberleys as well, which is an amazing place, so I want to pay my respects to their elders too. The theme of this conference is our decade of action for people, the planet and the economy. But it's really important that the decisions we make now look much further ahead, intergenerationally ahead, that we seek the knowledge of the traditional owners to understand what these timescales really look like. Fortescue Metals Group, which is the parent company of Fortescue Future Industries, who I work for, intend to play a key role in the future of green infrastructure. FFI, in fact, is already playing a critical role in the future of renewables and hydrogen, and intends to take our early adopter, early mover advantage to help decarbonise globally. You may have seen some announcements recently about Gibson Island and some of the other locations that we are looking to develop. Gibson Island could see the construction of a 500 megawatt green ammonia plant. So we're talking about some of the biggest green energy and ammonia projects in the world. So whilst we currently plan to export green hydrogen in the form of ammonia for the most part, we are also looking at the technology we need to improve liquefied hydrogen and other vectors that we can use to transport hydrogen globally. But what does that mean? Well, it means that we need to rapidly roll out infrastructure to support those plans. As I said, these are some of the biggest renewable energy projects in the world. We'll need rail, roads, port, transmission, pipelines, water treatment. We'll need batteries. We need the critical minerals for those batteries, the supply chain for solar and wind to rapidly upscale. We need electrolysers, ammonia plant, and the list goes on in terms of the level of infrastructure we need to deliver on our ambitious plans. But given that we're talking about the future of power this morning, it cannot be understated how critical that long-term sustainable land and water management is. I think Ashley has referred to that knowledge that our traditional owners have in terms of intergenerational land management. We're building projects on unceded Aboriginal land, and we want that to contribute to the world's decarbonisation. So whether or not that's First Nations people in Australia, America, Canada, or any of the other countries that we're currently planning the scale of renewables that we are at Fortescue Future Industries, the role of traditional owners on that land and the management of that land is central to everything we do. Having said that, there is no greater place on earth to tackle global decarbonisation than right here in Australia, and for my part, in Western Australia. We truly do have the best resources in the world, and I'm not talking about the metals and the minerals, I'm talking about the sun and the solar, the sun and the wind. We also have geopolitical stability. We finally have a committed government at almost every level and state. We have a good regulatory system. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good in global standards. So That makes Australia literally the best place in the world for global systems change for our energy systems. Yesterday we heard from one of my old colleagues, Simon Ancliffe. He's an ex-colleague of mine from both GHD and from London 2012. I worked on London 2012 for about 5 years, and when we talk about decades of change, I mean, the Games was on 10 years ago. We were working on it for 5 or 6 years before that, and making decisions about energy systems that we didn't have the answers to and we didn't get right. We are now at the point where we know what the answers are. Unfortunately, we've got very little carbon budget left. Simon touched on the fact that working on London 2012 was such an exciting and truly inspirational opportunity, and it's something that will touch the lives of so many people in Queensland. I can't encourage people enough to get involved in the Olympics. I have to say, however, leaving London after the Olympics was one of the hardest career choices I ever had to make. Not only had my hometown, my adopted hometown of East London, been completely transformed, but the entire construction and design community had been elevated to an exceptional level of sustainability. I wasn't sure how I would ever get to work on a project like it again if I was moving home to my hometown, to Boorloo, which you might know as Perth. Perth, or rather WA, is well known for its beaches, quokkas, and its mining and its minerals. It is not known for past leadership in sustainability. But thankfully, a couple of babies and the draw of my family meant I still made the commitment to return to Australia. Almost a decade later, as this year dawned, I started to realise something exciting was finally happening in my hometown. I've worked on decarbonisation since before London over in the UK with Carbon Trust and various other consulting, and I continue to do that work back in WA. But as that has gone on, it's become very apparent that the missing link for rapid decarbonisation, and so when I talk about that, I'm talking about a 1.5 degrees scenario, which for WA, we're already about 1.44, so the rapid bit is getting increasingly more rapid. But that was the missing link was no longer the cost of wind or the cost of solar. The missing link, just this week, our WA Energy Minister, Bill Johnson, wrote off coal assets by $400 million. And that was because the business model, this is his words, the business model of coal-fired power stations is totally broken. What, for me, working in heavy industry, was really clear was that rapid decarbonisation, to occur, we needed to make green hydrogen commercial, and to do that, we have to do it at scale. So it's great to finally feel again like I'm part of that solution. It's the same feeling as working at London 2012. And it's something that is happening right here in Australia. A whole new industry is starting, and it's so exciting to be a part of that. So a little bit about Fortescue. I did have some slides, but I'm winging it now. Fortescue was established in 2003, and it's one of the world's largest iron ore producers, now shipping at an annual rate of over 180 million tonnes and more than 1.7 billion tonnes of iron ore delivered since 2008. Quickly, because I've now got a bit more people in the audience, who's going to retire, say, in the next decade? Anyone in the room? A reasonable number? Say by 2032? How many people think they're going to retire in the next 20 years? I think that would be me. How many people think, and everyone to answer, who's going to be retired in 2050? Pretty much everyone. Still a young crowd here, I think. At FFI, we don't believe there's any point in making 2050 targets which are beyond what we intend to work to. We've set our net zero target for 2030 for scope 1 and 2. And by net zero, we actually mean real zero. So we're looking at eliminating emissions from all of our scope 1 and 2 and not planning on offsetting as far as possible. We've also set a target for net zero on our Scope 3 emissions by 2040. That means we have to work on our supply chain as well. So not only looking at green iron ore, which we intend to be one of the first to deliver, but also at scale, but also influencing that supply chain so that we can produce green steel. In order to do all of this, we've partnered with Liebrig for haul trucks, and we've also acquired a business called Williams Advanced Engineering. We have a design for an infinity train, which, if you know Western Australia, the Pilbara is where most of the mining and minerals occur. Port Hedland is, to get to the port, the iron ore is transported downhill by a 37,000 tonne train. It spends the majority of time braking. So we intend to use that inertial energy generation to charge the batteries, and there's sufficient charging to send the train back up again. So it really will be a zero emissions train. We've also been working on our haul trucks. For anyone who knows mining, the diesel used for heavy trucks is one of the biggest issues. So we can decarbonise our grids, but the trucks have always been the big issue. So with that partnership with Liebrig, we're making big advances in that area. We also have a 50 million tonne per annum takeoff agreement with E.ON in Europe, which means that we are working very hard to try and build those projects in time to deliver green hydrogen to Germany and Europe. I think it's really important to just come back to that geopolitical stability piece. I think we're all aware of what's happening in the Ukraine and Russia and the impact that that's had on gas and gas security in Europe. So the timelines for which we want to deliver green hydrogen have increased, and that pressure is on. I had a few other bits to talk to you about, some slides about our sustainability and our community efforts. And this is one of the nice things, that whilst FFI is a startup business, a very big startup global energy business, it's the parent company of FMG, has a long-established relationship in communities, working with traditional owners and the community. So we're quite proud that we have that in place, so that when we go into other communities throughout Australia, that we can bring the knowledge and learning from those programs, community programs that we've had. Perhaps one of the most successful has been VTech, our Vocational Training and Employment Centre, which takes on young trainees, or don't have to be young, but guarantees a job once the training is complete. So in financial year 22, 57 graduates will have completed that training, and we have that kind of turnaround, and this has been going on for many years. We also have our Billion Opportunities, which is focused around First Nations in the West. However, we're looking at how we leverage its success for local and regional businesses throughout Australia and globally. Our Billion Opportunities program forms a critical element of our approach to ensuring economic opportunity and growth for the traditional custodians of the regions we operate in. In financial year 22, FMG awarded $513 million in contracts to Aboriginal businesses across 66 businesses, and the program has seen $4 billion in contracts delivered to Aboriginal businesses since its inception in 2011. So I guess in closing out, I would welcome everyone to look at this next decade with excitement and hope. I think at different times in the past couple of decades, there have been times where I thought, we're just not going to be able to do it, and we've lost a lot of years along the way. But so much has happened in the last couple of years that I'm very hopeful. I'm truly excited that things are happening in my own hometown, and that also the work that everyone's doing on the 2032 Olympics will really bring systems change to the businesses that we work in here in infrastructure. Thank you.
What a nightmare. That is literally every presenter's completely worst nightmare. I thought you carried it off magnificently. Thank you very much. Certainly such an important thing to be taking a portfolio approach as well to how we consider power and the management of land and water. We're going to have to move at a reasonable pace, so thank you very much for giving Holly in fact, I think she deserves another round of applause. How many of you would actually want to stand up here and find you've got no slides? That is not an easy thing at all. Let's move to our next presenter now, and we're going to introduce Stephen Troughton, who's a partner at KPMG. And hopefully your slides are, you're not? Oh, I'm so sorry, that's because I haven't got my glasses on. Aren't I terrible? I'm doing a shocking job this morning. You are, in fact, Project Director PEC at Transgrid.
Yes, that's right.
Sorry, that's my fault for not wearing my glasses. Although, if you like, you could try to do the other presentation, because that might
make it harder, yeah. Good morning, everybody. Let me begin by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi peoples, traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and acknowledge all Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I'd like to set the scene by playing a short video which outlines Transgrid's critical role in achieving Australia's energy transition, delivering major transmission projects which will enable the sharing of clean energy across the eastern seaboard.
Renewable energy future is accelerating, and Transgrid is making it possible. Our priority projects will reshape the grid, enabling cheaper electricity bills and an economic boost for regional New South Wales.
We're building the superhighways of energy that's going to be needed to move renewable energy from the regions to the cities, to trade energy between the states and the regions, which goes to energy security.
The Queensland-New South Wales Interconnector has just been completed, while the Victoria-New South Wales Interconnector, which uses smart technology for greater energy sharing, will be finished soon. Energy Connect, the new interconnector between New South Wales and South Australia, is well underway, and we are talking to communities about VNI West and HumeLink.
Transgrid is absolutely committed to make the system stronger and to drive costs down into the future.
As global leaders attempt to navigate the critical energy and climate change challenges that we have at the moment, I really want to applaud the architects of the climate change bill. It's a real significant bit of legislation. It's already radically changing Australia's energy future and how we approach this sort of great transition that we're going to go through over the next 10 years. This electricity system will play a central role in supporting Australia's decarbonisation. And renewable electricity will be our main form of energy as we go forward. We've got no time to lose. We've got to act quickly and decisively and get the job done. While the government's ambition is to reach a national emissions reduction target within 8 years, from a perspective of transmission, we've far less time. According to the Rewiring the Nation plan, meeting the government's 2030 target of cutting emissions by 43% will mean boosting renewable energy by 82%. So that's a huge change for our electricity supply. To achieve that target, we have to make the grid fit for renewables. There will be no transition to renewable energy without transmission. The Australian Energy Market Operator, which we call AEMO, their 2022 Integrated System Plan states investment in new transmission needs to begin as urgently as possible. Transgrid recently published its own transmission annual planning report, which supports calls for major transmission projects to be delivered faster and cheaper for all of our consumers. We believe we need to move faster than AEMO state, and our analysis suggests that technical, commercial, environmental and social pressures will lead to coal generators retiring even more rapidly than currently forecast, particularly as the competition from renewables comes into play. That's why Transgrid is building the transmission superhighway, which will transform energy supply for millions of Australians. We are powering our energy transition. New renewable generation is being built all across the eastern seaboard, and our grid will get that renewable energy to market. The scale of new transition required is unprecedented in Australia. Just looking at our major projects alone, if we put all the transmission cables together, we'll go from Sydney to London and 3/4 of the way back again. As you saw on the intro, we've recently completed 3 significant transmission projects on time, budget, and also with a community focus. We delivered the $236 million upgrade of the Queensland-New South Wales interconnector, enabling more energy to flow between the 2 states. We're also on track to deliver our Victoria-New South Wales interconnector later this year. This enables renewable energy from Victoria to flow into New South Wales and ACT when the demand requires. This project represents the first large-scale use of smart valve technology in Australia. The clever units redirect power off overloaded transmission lines onto lines with spare capacity, and this really enables us to build less infrastructure, so innovation in what we're doing is really important. We're really, really proud of all the significant work we're doing. The energy crisis back in June really highlighted the critical urgency of building greater resilience in our energy grid and diversifying from thermal generation really as soon as possible. It showed the high costs and system risks that can occur when there are a high number of generator outages, both planned and unplanned outages. We believe the next tranche of crucial AMO projects coming online should be completed faster than the current schedule and are cheaper than the current approach. We're currently developing 3 new major projects that are of critical significance: ISC Connect, HumeLink, and VNI West. These projects will enable the integration of existing future wind, solar, and hydropower, getting this energy to market and filling the gap left by coal-powered fire stations as they become unreliable and they start to retire. Currently, these projects are scoped as separate projects, and each are at different stages of development. Construction is well underway on ISC Connect, 900 kilometres of transmission infrastructure connecting the power grids of New South Wales, South Australia, and Victoria. HumeLink will increase the transfer capacity between southern New South Wales and major load centres of Sydney, Newcastle, and Wollongong. The Australian Energy Regulator recently provided a vote of confidence in the project, providing a $322 million funding agreement for Stage 1 early works. Transgrid is also planning the VNI West project, which enables more energy sharing between New South Wales and Victoria. The delivery of these 3 projects will really reshape the whole national electricity market, providing a strong and stable platform for Australia's economic growth. All 3 projects are critical to implementing the recently released Integrated Systems Plan, and we're proposing an integrated solution to the construction of these separate projects into a single program. We're really confident this approach will deliver the projects faster than the timelines set out by AMO. When we look at the bigger picture, measures that are affordable today will be much costlier in the future, and you're seeing this across Europe at the moment, where power prices are tripling at the moment, and significant pressures are put on peoples and families. So, according to Endgame Economics, a 1-year delay in transmission investment would increase a residential consumer's bill by an average of $327 over the period 2026 to 2040. A 4-year delay would increase the same bill by an average of $1,791. So, a significant increase if we delay our investment in transmission lines. Early delivery, on the other hand, will really put an important signal in for the renewable energy developers to bring that generation forward and to start their construction. Excuse me. Transgrid is not just playing a vital role in delivering the nation's transition to a clean energy future. We're also ensuring we deliver this in the right way, that does not make a problem worse by designing or constructing our infrastructure to optimise environmental, social and economic outcomes. I'm delighted to be TransGrid's project director for Energy Connect, which represents a real significant step in achieving the nation's energy transition. The interconnect is being built between Wagga Wagga in New South Wales and Robertstown in South Australia. We've got a connection down into Victoria and to Redcliffs. These connections will expand the wholesale electricity market across 3 states, meaning increased reliability and security of our electricity supply. Energy Connect will also allow the integration of renewables into the southwest of New South Wales. There's a renewable energy zone down in the Riverina-Murray area. We tie into that. This provides the best chance of meeting our clean energy targets and help drive down the cost of wholesale electricity. The critical project will save New South Wales energy customers $180 million a year in their bills. It will generate about 1,500 new jobs and provide $4 billion in economic benefits. We're working really closely with our delivery partner, Secure Energy, trying to set benchmarks in sustainability and best practice for the future projects of energy transmission across the country. I'm proud that we're the first project of our kind in Australia to use the IS rating tool. It's a first for the transmission industry, which is really, really good. It really means a genuine commitment from TransGrid to deliver real sustainability outcomes for Energy Connect, particularly focused on applying innovative solutions to reducing our carbon footprint, minimising the use of energy and water, protecting biodiversity, decreasing waste, and building in resilience against forecast climate change. TransGrid and Secure Energy aim to achieve a minimum 15% reduction in life cycle greenhouse gas emissions by using guide towers, which you can see on the screen, which these require 15% less steel and 25% less concrete. These are a first for TransGrid. We're also using low carbon concrete, and we've also come up with a reduced vegetation clearing program. We're designing and locating our transmission line structures. We've got 1,500 in the New South Wales section to avoid sensitive biodiversity and also culturally sensitive sites. In fact, we recognise that protecting and enhancing the ecology impacted by the project is an important part of our environmental stewardship obligations. We're also diverting waste away from landfill. One of the biggest problems in the regions is the lack of landfill. So we're working with suppliers to minimise unnecessary packaging, maximising recyclability and reusability of that packaging, and reusing all of our spoils on sites. We're driving a sustainable supply chain through the integration of environmental, social and economic aspects in the project's procurement policies, contracts and processes. We're looking to reduce construction water by using non-water-based dust suppression alternatives and also drawing construction water from grey water from our plants at camps. We've got 6 camps over the alignment. As clearly demonstrated, we're taking our responsibility seriously to identify and manage environmental, social and economic impacts from the project. So in closing, the electricity system is transitioning towards renewables at an incredible rate, even faster than we all expected. To manage this energy transmission in the best interests of consumers, we must keep pace with market changes, progress priority transmission projects like Energy Connect as urgently as possible. Otherwise, we run the risk of unacceptable consumer and economic outcomes and more energy market crises. Building now to facilitate the connection of new renewable generation and storage is the only acceptable path forward for Australia's energy consumers, who then will reap the rewards of our investments for generations to come. Our commitment to sustainable design, construction and operation of our transmission infrastructure remains unwavering. Thank you very much.
so sorry for transposing my script there. I have no excuse because your name and your project title are right here in black and white. It was interesting, however, for me to hear about the transmission superhighway, and I really like the idea that our energy transition is not only leading the world, but doing it in a socially responsible and environmentally responsible way. Now let's see if I can get the next introduction completely nailed. I am pleased to introduce Ben Ellis, partner at KPMG.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this conference. We're quite excited this week to release our research on electric vehicles, and that's what I'll be talking about today. Sorry. Just while I've got this slide up, there is a QR code if you'd like to download our report. That is available now. I'll also be able to put it up at the end of the presentation. So just starting with the motivation, why were we looking at electric vehicles? There's two key reasons. The first one is the government's carbon reduction targets to 2030, 43%, and net zero by 2050. And if you have a look at the contribution that the transport sector makes to our carbon emissions, it's around 20% of Australia's emissions come from the transport sector. 85% of those emissions come from road-related transport. So what are the government starting to do about this? In Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales have set themselves a target of new car sales being 50% for electric vehicles. And how are we currently doing? Well, to date this year, about 2% of new vehicle sales are electric. If I can just ask, similar to Holly, did anyone arrive here in an electric vehicle? Which model? Prius. Is that a hybrid or a battery electric vehicle? It's a hybrid. Okay, now that's not surprising, and we'll go through why that might be the case. So I'm going to talk about the current state of ownership in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, the types of travel behaviours that we exhibit, and the types of cars that we own. I'll then talk about vehicle emission standards in Australia and why they're important. I'll then introduce the KPMG EV Insights and Analytics platform, which is a tool we've developed to track and predict EV uptake at a local suburb level in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. So the current state. So this slide and the next slide are looking at the most common registered vehicle in each suburb in our major cities. What you can see is in and around the inner city, quite dominated by smaller cars, the Volkswagen Golf, Toyota Corolla. And as we move into the outer suburbs, you can see that larger vehicles start to dominate. So these are your Holden Commodores, Toyota Hilux, and Toyota Land Cruiser. And this is, on the screen here, is Brisbane. You can see a lot of yellow there. So this is the Toyota Land Cruiser, is the most common registered vehicle in these suburbs. So this is going to have important implications for likely uptake of electric vehicles in terms of what substitutions are available for people. The other important point to make is that there's around 100 different models of ICE vehicles available in Australia, but really the top 10 or 8 contribute around 30% of those sales. So really targeting those types of vehicles is going to be important for EV uptake. If we move to, and I do apologise, the formatting looks like it's not worked in the transition, but similar trend emerges for Sydney and Melbourne. In Sydney, there is a bit more of the Corollas into the outer suburbs, but on the right there is Melbourne, and I think what's interesting, all of that blue is the Holden Commodore. Now, unfortunately for the Holden Commodore, it stopped production in 2017 and it's just had its last race at Bathurst. So again, this is important for what is the likely substitution for a Commodore, which at the moment there isn't really that choice available for people. So again, it's not that surprising that the Holden Commodore in Melbourne at least is the most common registered vehicle. If we look at the fleet age at an individual suburb level, you start to see why that might be the case. So in the inner city, you can see that the average car age is around 5 to 8 years. And as we start to move out, the postcodes start to get a bit darker blue. We see that the average age of the fleet is over 12 years, so 12 to 15 years. So this is, again, is having some important implications for how likely the fleet is to turn over. And we can see that in the outer suburbs, people are holding onto their cars a bit longer. So that renewal will take a longer time to happen in the outer suburbs relative to the inner city. Now, what are the travel patterns of people in each of these suburbs? Now, what we're looking at here is the commuting distances in each of the 3 cities. And it's the same trend in all 3 cities. Shorter commutes closer to the inner city. As we start to move out, you can really see those travel distances increasing quite significantly. Brisbane is very clear example of that, and Melbourne. In Sydney, there's some more employment centres that are starting to pick up that are outside of the CBD, and that's why we're starting to see, that trend improving a little bit. It might surprise you that Australia doesn't have vehicle emission standards. The federal government has released their National Electric Vehicle Strategy consultation paper, and they've posed the question, would the incorporation of vehicle emission standards in Australia send the signal to OEMs to send EVs to our market? I will touch on that at the end, but we do think this is an important policy lever that government can use to bring more EVs into Australia. In Europe, the target that they've set for their fleet in terms of emissions is 95 grams per kilometre. So this chart is showing our 8 most common registered vehicles in Australia and how their emission standards or their emissions have improved or not improved over time. So you can see there for the Toyota Land Cruiser, there hasn't been a gain over the last 10 years in terms of the emissions that it makes. The Corolla is probably the best performing, but if we are to bring down our emissions across our whole fleet, you can see that electric vehicles need to be an important part of the equation. Just to highlight this point, and I do apologise for the formatting, they were nicely designed, I can assure you. Just looking at 2 suburbs in Brisbane, so Logan and Paddington. For commuters in Paddington, 8-kilometre journey into work. For Logan, twice the distance. In terms of the typical fleet age in Paddington versus Logan, double, 7 to 13. And then the interesting one is the grams per kilometre emissions from the fleet in those suburbs. So you can see Paddington 158 and Logan significantly higher. And that's based on the type of cars that are registered in those suburbs and the age. Now, well above the 95 gram target that has been set by Europe, so clearly some work to do. So what have we been doing at KPMG? We've developed our electric vehicle insights and analytics platform, and this is a tool that we're able to track and predict EV uptake at a small area level, and this is a model that we'll be updating monthly as we get new EV registration data. But some of the key factors that we're looking up that influence uptake, the first is range. So range anxiety is real, and the current average range for EV fleet in Australia is about 350. New models that are coming in will likely increase that range to 500 kilometres, which is on par with most ICE vehicles. In terms of the price is a big one, and affordability will only further dampen, or the lack of affordability will further dampen uptake of EVs. So at the moment, the average EV is around $30,000 to $40,000 more expensive than an ICE vehicle. Models, so I touched on that one. So the range of models and the opportunities for people to substitute their car for a Holden, a Land Cruiser, a Hilux, there aren't really the choices available for people to change to an EV. So having more models and supply into Australia will be important. On the socio-economics, spoke about incomes and affordability, that's obviously important. The dwelling type and ownership. So this is what's the opportunity for people to charge their electric vehicle at home, which will be, most people will want to be able to charge their vehicles at home. So we've looked at that, and I think for rentals as well, this is a big issue. Will landlords be likely to put EV charging in their homes for tenants? Commuting patterns, so obviously the type of trips that people are making will influence their choice if they can or want to take up an EV. Population density, so this is a trend that we found in Sydney, and I'm not sure, it didn't really hold in Melbourne and Brisbane. I don't know if people in Sydney are materialistic or what it is, but we did find that in suburbs where there was some strong EV uptake, the following months there was also some strong uptake in the suburbs clustered around that. So maybe some keeping up with the Joneses effect that's happening in Sydney. Okay, if we go to some of the results. So this is inner city, and inner city of Sydney, and we can see strong uptake in a suburb like Neutral Bay, where we predict that 70% of new car sales would be electric. If you compare that to Fairfield, which is not too far away, but in the inner west of Sydney, only 8% of new car sales would be EVs. So you can see maybe at an overall average level, we might be getting close to that 50% target that the government set for 2030, but the growth is going to be disparate across the city. If we just take a look at what the fleet share would be for that suburb, for Neutral Bay, we'd get about 22% total vehicles there would be EVs, but in Fairfield, only 2%. Similar trend emerges for Brisbane and Melbourne, although I would say that Brisbane has probably got some work to do. We predict that by 2030, 6% of all vehicles in Brisbane will be EVs, and this compares to Melbourne of 10% and Sydney of 11%. So what you can start to see is that EVs really are a local matter. So we need to start thinking about policies that can really have equal uptake across our cities. Okay, when it comes to emissions, so what we've looked at here is Craigieburn in Melbourne versus Melbourne CBD, and the type of emissions reductions you can get from replacing an EV in each of those suburbs. So despite the EV uptake of around 4% in Craigieburn versus 23% in the Melbourne CBD, we can see that we can get a 5 to 10 times increase or improvements in emissions if we were to replace an EV in Craigieburn as opposed to Melbourne. Similar trends for Sydney and Brisbane. If we take Paddington and Logan, if we were to replace an EV in Logan as opposed to Paddington, we'd get a 272% improvement in emissions reductions. So just in closing, we've come up with 3 recommendations to help improve EV uptake equally across our cities. The first is the adequate supply of EVs. We spoke about emission standards, and the OEMs have said themselves that without these emission standards, there's no incentive for them to bring EVs into the Australian market. So KPMG would support the Euro 6 emission standards being brought into Australia. In terms of affordability and model availability, improving that supply of vehicles will help with model availability, but the government does need to do some work to speak to those OEMs to start to bring in the types of cars people in Australia like to drive, which are utes, SUVs and Commodores. So we need to do some work there. Our final recommendation is, as we've seen throughout the slides, people with longer commutes, people further out from the suburbs need some additional support to potentially people in the inner city. So in Austria, there are income tax deductions that are available for people with long commutes, or for every kilometre over a certain distance, they're able to claim that as a tax deduction at the end of the year. And that's something we should start thinking about for electric vehicles, because as we've shown, the uptake of EVs is quite different across our cities. And if we really want to focus in on reducing the emissions in the transport sector, we need to target those outer suburbs. Thank you.